The roar of the river echoed through the valley as Olivia Whittaker desperately clung to a floating piece of driftwood, her fingers white with strain. Clara. She screamed over the thunder of the rushing water, catching glimpses of her younger sister's copper hair bobbing in the violent current ahead. The spring flood had come without warning, transforming the usually tranquil Animas River into a raging torrent that had swept them away from the riverbank where they'd been washing clothes. New Mexico Territory, 1878, Olivia had never known such terror. At 22, she had faced many challenges since moving west with her sister following their parents' death, but nothing had prepared her for the raw power of the river that now dragged them downstream toward Hillsborough. The water was frigid, numbing her limbs and stealing her breath, but she refused to surrender to panic. Clara was only 19, she had to reach her. "Hold on, Clara," she shouted, though her voice was lost in the cacophony of rushing water. She kicked frantically, trying to propel herself toward her sister, but the current was too strong, carrying them both inexorably downstream. Just as Olivia felt her strength beginning to fail, she heard a shout from the riverbank. Through water-blurred eyes, she saw a rider on horseback galloping alongside the river, keeping pace with their drifting forms. The man wore a wide-brimmed hat and moved with the practiced ease of someone who had spent his life in the saddle. Without hesitation, the rider spurred his horse into the shallows, and then, in a move that seemed like madness, straight into the churning water. Olivia watched in disbelief as the powerful horse fought against the current, the cowboy expertly guiding it toward Clara, who had fallen unconscious, her face dangerously close to slipping beneath the surface. The rider leaned perilously from his saddle, one strong arm reaching out to grasp Clara's dress. With a mighty heave, he pulled her limp form across his saddle. But the rescue had cost him. The current was pushing his horse downstream, directly toward a section where fallen trees created a deadly obstacle. "Hold on," he shouted to Olivia, maneuvering his horse toward her as they both rushed toward the hazard. As they drew alongside, he extended his hand. "Grab hold. Now," Olivia summoned her remaining strength and reached out, their fingers brushing once, twice, before finally locking together. His grip was iron, and with one powerful tug, he pulled her toward him just as her makeshift raft splintered against the first of the fallen trees. The cowboy's horse neighed in distress as it battled the current, its nostrils flaring with exertion. "Steady, Thunder," the man called, his voice somehow calming the frightened animal. With Olivia clinging to his waist and Clara draped across the saddle in front of him, the rider guided his horse toward the bank, fighting against the river that seemed determined to claim them all. When they finally reached the shore, Olivia collapsed onto the muddy ground, coughing up river water. The cowboy quickly dismounted, gently laying Clara on the ground beside her. "She's not breathing," Olivia gasped, panic rising in her chest as she crawled toward her sister. The cowboy knelt beside Clara, turning her onto her side and firmly patting her back. "Come on, miss," he muttered, his voice tense but determined. Long seconds passed, and then Clara convulsed, water spewing from her mouth as she gasped for air. Relief flooded through Olivia as Clara began to cough weakly. Only then did she look properly at their rescuer. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of the sky after a storm. Water dripped from his dark hair and beard, and his soaked clothes clung to a frame shaped by years of hard work. "Thank you," Olivia whispered, her voice breaking. "You saved our lives." He tipped his hat, water cascading from its brim. "Wade Daniels, madam, just happened to be in the right place." His voice was deep and carried the slight drawl of a man who'd spent time in Texas. "Olivia Whittaker," she replied, "and this is my sister, Clara." She brushed wet strands of hair from Clara's pale face. "I don't know how we can ever repay you." Wade glanced at the darkening sky. "No need for payment, Miss Whittaker, but we need to get you both warm and dry before nightfall. My cabin's not far from here." Olivia hesitated. Two unmarried women accepting shelter from a stranger went against everything proper society taught. But as Clara shivered violently beside her, she knew they had little choice. "We accept your offer, Mr. Daniels," she said, gratefully. Wade nodded, lifting Clara into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "Can you ride, Miss Whittaker?" Olivia nodded, though in truth she felt weak as a newborn colt. Wade helped her into the saddle before mounting behind her, cradling Clara between them. As thunder carried them away from the river that had nearly claimed their lives, Olivia couldn't help but lean back slightly against the solid warmth of the man who had risked everything to save them. Wade's cabin stood in a small clearing surrounded by ponderosa pines, modest but sturdy against the elements. A corral housed two other horses who nickered at thunder's approach. A thin plume of smoke still rose from the chimney, suggesting Wade hadn't been gone long before spotting them in the river. "It's not much," Wade said as he dismounted, carefully bringing Clara down with him, "but it's dry." Inside, the cabin was simple but orderly. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a wooden table and chairs nearby. A curtained area in the back presumably hid a sleeping area. Wade immediately moved to the hearth, laying Clara gently on a bearskin rug before adding logs to coax the embers back to life. "There are dry clothes in that trunk," he said, gesturing to a wooden chest. "They'll be big on you both, but they're clean. I'll tend to thunder while you change." With that, he discreetly stepped outside. Olivia quickly found shirts and trousers that would serve, helping her semi-conscious sister change first. Clara's lips were still tinged with blue, her movements sluggish. "Stay with me, Clara," Olivia urged, rubbing her sister's arms briskly to restore circulation. By the time Wade returned, both women were dressed in his oversized clothing, and Olivia had wrapped Clara in a woolen blanket close to the now blazing fire. Wade carried in a kettle of water from the outside pump, hanging it over the fire. "Coffee will help warm you from the inside," he said, removing his wet hat and coat. He moved with the quiet efficiency of a man accustomed to taking care of himself. "You live out here alone, Mr. Daniels?" Olivia asked, trying to ignore how his damp shirt clung to his broad shoulders as he worked. He nodded. "5 years now, raise horses mostly, do some hunting and trapping." He paused. "And it's Wade, please." "Wade," she repeated softly. "We've only been in Hillsborough for 3 months. Our parents died last year influenza. We came west to start fresh." She didn't mention how difficult that fresh start had been, how the respectable jobs for women were scarce, how they'd barely been keeping their small rented room. Wade studied her with those storm blue eyes. "It takes courage to make a new beginning," he said simply, then turned to check on the coffee. Clara stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Livy," she murmured. "Where are we?" "Safe," Olivia assured her, smoothing her sister's hair. "This is Mr. Daniels Wade. He pulled us from the river." Clara's eyes widened as memory returned. The river, it came so fast. 1 minute we were washing linens and the next, she shuddered. "Spring melt from the mountains," Wade explained, pouring steaming coffee into 3 tin cups. "River can rise 6 feet in an hour when it's in full flood." He handed them each a cup. "Careful, it's hot." As they sipped the strong brew, color gradually returned to Clara's cheeks. Outside, the light was fading and rain began to patter against the cabin's roof. "You'll stay the night," Wade said, making it a statement rather than a question. "Roads will be mud by now, and you both need rest." He moved to the back of the cabin, returning with more blankets. "I'll sleep by the fire. You ladies can take the bed." Olivia wanted to protest the impropriety, but exhaustion was settling into her bones. "Thank you," she said instead. "For everything." Later, as she lay beside her sleeping sister in Wade's surprisingly comfortable bed, Olivia listened to the rain drumming on the roof and the occasional crackle of the fire. She could just make out Wade's silhouette as he sat in a chair near the hearth, cleaning what looked like a saddle strap. There was something comforting about his presence, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with the powerful arms that had pulled them from the river. Olivia had met many men since coming west, most of them rough, some dangerous, others too forward with women they perceived as vulnerable. Wade Daniels seemed different, though she couldn't quite define how. As sleep finally claimed her, Olivia's last thought was that perhaps the river that had nearly taken their lives had also swept them toward something or someone unexpected. Morning arrived with shafts of golden light streaming through the cabin's single window. Olivia woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't place where she was, but then the events of the previous day rushed back. She sat up quickly, relieved to find Clara still sleeping peacefully beside her. In the main room, Wade stood at the small cookstove, deftly turning strips of bacon in a cast iron pan. He'd changed into fresh clothing, a blue cotton shirt tucked into worn denims, and his damp hair was neatly combed. "Morning," he said, glancing over as she emerged from behind the curtain. "Hope you don't mind an early breakfast. I'm used to starting with the sun." "Of course not," Olivia replied, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance and the fact that she was wearing his clothes. "I should help." Wade shook his head. "Sit, you need to regain your strength." He poured her a cup of coffee and slid it across the table. Olivia sat, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Our clothes, I should check if they're dry." "Already did. Hung them by the fire last night. They're nearly ready." He nodded toward where their dresses and undergarments were spread on a rack near the hearth. Olivia felt her cheeks warm at the thought of him handling their personal items, but his manner was so matter-of-fact that she couldn't take offense. Clara appeared then, looking remarkably recovered despite the ordeal. "Something smells wonderful," she said, offering Wade a shy smile. "I feel as though I could eat a whole side of bacon myself." Wade chuckled, a pleasant sound that transformed his serious face. "Plenty to go around, Miss Clara. And biscuits too, if you don't mind them a bit rough. I'm no baker." They ate together at the small table, the meal simple but satisfying. As they finished, Wade finally asked the question Olivia had been dreading. "Where were you ladies headed when the river took you?" Olivia exchanged a glance with Clara. "We weren't headed anywhere. We were washing linens for Mrs. Sullivan's boarding house. It's where we've been working. The riverbank seemed safe enough yesterday morning." "Mrs. Sullivan's?" Wade's brow furrowed. "Over on Pine Street," Olivia nodded. "We have a room there, small pay but the room's included." "Martha Sullivan works her help harder than mules," Wade said, his tone disapproving, "and that place has a reputation." Clara looked down at her plate. "We know, but there weren't many options for two women alone." Wade said nothing for a long moment, then stood to clear the plates. "I need to ride into town anyway. I'll take you back once you're ready." While the sisters changed back into their now dry dresses behind the curtain, Olivia whispered, "He seems to know Hillsborough well." Clara nodded. "Yet I've never seen him in town. I wonder why he lives so isolated out here." Olivia had wondered the same thing. Wade Daniels didn't strike her as a man hiding from the law. His cabin was too orderly, his manner too straightforward. But there was a wariness about him, a deliberate distance that suggested he preferred solitude for reasons of his own. When they emerged, Wade had saddled Thunder and another horse, a dappled mare. "Miss Clara can ride with me," he said. "Miss Olivia, Daisy here is gentle as they come." The ride to Hillsborough took nearly 2 hours, much of it in companionable silence. The landscape around them was transformed by the previous day's rain. Wildflowers dotted the hillsides, and the desert scrub seemed to have greened overnight. Twice they had to detour around sections of trail that had washed out. As they approached the outskirts of town, Olivia found herself wishing the journey were longer. There was something peaceful about riding beside Wade, watching how he handled his horse with quiet confidence, how his eyes constantly scanned the terrain ahead. The town of Hillsborough had grown rapidly in the 3 years since silver was discovered in the nearby hills. What had once been little more than a trading post now boasted a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and various other establishments catering to miners and ranchers. Mrs. Sullivan's boarding house stood on a side street, a 2-story structure that had seen better days. As they approached, Olivia noticed a small crowd gathered outside. Drawing closer, she recognized Mrs. Sullivan herself, a stout woman with perpetually reddened cheeks, speaking animatedly with the town marshal. "Oh no," Clara murmured from where she sat in front of Wade. "What's happened now?" As they dismounted, Mrs. Sullivan spotted them and rushed over, her expression changing from concern to outrage. "Where have you two been?" she demanded. "Missing all night, leaving me short-handed. I've had the marshal out looking for you." Before Olivia could respond, Wade stepped forward. They nearly drowned in the Animas yesterday during the flash flood, Mrs. Sullivan. I pulled them out. The marshal, a tall man with a graying mustache, approached. Daniels, he said, his tone neutral. Been a while since we've seen you in town. Wade nodded. Marshal Evans, Mrs. Sullivan's eyes narrowed as she looked between Wade and the sisters. Well, that's a convenient tale, and I suppose you've been keeping them at your place all this time, Daniels. Two unmarried women. Olivia felt anger rise in her chest. We would have died if not for Mr. Daniels. He saved our lives and showed us nothing but kindness and respect. I'm sure he did, Mrs. Sullivan sniffed, her implication clear. Well, you needn't bother coming back to work. I've already hired replacements. You can collect your things and be gone by noon, Clara gasped. But Mrs. Sullivan, where will we go? We have nowhere else. The woman shrugged. Not my concern. I run a respectable establishment. Wade's jaw tightened. Respectable? Is that what you call charging minors double for watered whiskey and renting rooms by the hour in the back, Mrs. Sullivan's face flushed darker. How dare you, Marshal, are you going to let him speak to me this way? Marshal Evans sighed. That's enough, all of you. Mrs. Sullivan, these ladies clearly had an accident. As for you, Daniels, I suggest you mind your own business. I'm making it my business, Wade replied, his voice quiet but firm. He turned to Olivia and Clara. Get your belongings. You can stay at my place until you sort things out. Olivia stared at him in surprise. Wade, that's very kind, but we couldn't impose. It's not an imposition, he cut in. I've got the space and it's safe. Besides, I could use some help with the horses. Mrs. Sullivan made a sound of disgust. Well, if that doesn't confirm what I suspected, you two had better take his offer. You won't find work elsewhere in town once word spreads about your accident. Olivia felt her face burning with humiliation and anger. She glanced at Clara, who looked close to tears, then back at Wade, who stood resolute. We accept your offer, she said finally. Thank you. Inside the boarding house, as they hastily packed their meager possessions, Clara whispered, Livy, are we making a mistake? We barely know him. Olivia folded a simple blue dress into their shared trunk. He saved our lives, Clara, and you heard Mrs. Sullivan, our reputation in town is already damaged. Besides, did you see how the marshal knew him? If Wade were dangerous, surely the law would have concerns. Clara nodded slowly. He seems honorable and kind, she hesitated, and his cabin is lovely, so peaceful compared to town. Olivia smiled at her sister's dreamy expression. Don't get too comfortable. This is temporary just until we can find proper work. Yet as they loaded their trunk onto Wade's wagon, which he'd apparently borrowed from a friend in town, Olivia couldn't ignore the flutter of anticipation in her chest. The prospect of returning to the quiet cabin in the pines felt strangely like going home, though she'd spent only one night there. As they left Hillsborough behind, the marshal approached on horseback, catching up to them on the outskirts of town. Daniels, he called. A word. Wade pulled the wagon to a halt, nodding for the sisters to stay seated as he stepped down to speak with Evans. Though they kept their voices low, Olivia could just make out their conversation. You sure about this? The marshal asked. Taking in two women you barely know, Wade's response was measured. They need help. I have the space. People will talk, more than they already do. Let them. Wouldn't be the first time. Evans sighed. Just be careful, town's changing. More people means more trouble. He paused. Speaking of trouble, Thompson's been asking about you, says you still owe him for that bay stallion. Wade's posture stiffened. I paid him fair. He's trying to squeeze more because the horse turned out better than expected. Well, he's been drinking heavy at the Prospector's Rest, making threats. Thought you should know. Appreciated, Marshal. I'll keep an eye out. As Wade returned to the wagon, Olivia pretended she hadn't been listening, but her mind was racing with questions. Who was Thompson? And what did the marshal mean about people talking more than they already did? Wade flicked the reins, setting the wagon in motion once more. They traveled in silence for several minutes before he finally spoke. I should explain something, he said, eyes fixed on the trail ahead. I keep to myself for a reason. 5 years ago, I was falsely accused of horse theft in Texas. Spent 8 months in jail before they caught the real thief. By then, my reputation was ruined. His hands tightened on the reins. Came here for a fresh start, but rumors have a way of following a man. Olivia studied his profile, noting the tension in his jaw. Is that why the marshal seemed concerned about us staying with you, because of old rumors? Wade nodded. Some folks in town still think I'm not to be trusted, others just think I'm odd for living alone in the hills. He glanced at her. If you'd rather find other arrangements, no, Olivia said firmly. We know something about unfair judgment, don't we, Clara? Clara nodded emphatically. When we first arrived in Hillsborough, people assumed we were looking for work at the saloon, not as housekeepers. Two women traveling alone are immediately suspicious, it seems. Wade's expression softened slightly. Then we understand each other. Just thought you should know what you're getting into. The rest of the journey passed more comfortably, with Clara pointing out wildflowers she recognized and Wade occasionally naming birds that darted across their path. By the time they reached the cabin, the afternoon sun was casting long shadows through the pines. I'll show you the spring house, Wade said as he helped unload their trunk. It's where I keep milk and butter cool. And there's a vegetative garden behind the cabin, not much yet, but the lettuce is coming up nicely. The domestic details seemed at odds with his rugged appearance, and Olivia found herself smiling. You've made quite a home here, Wade shrugged, but she caught a hint of pride in his eyes. A man's got to eat, figured I might as well do it proper. Over the next few days, they settled into an unexpected but harmonious routine. Wade rose before dawn to tend the horses, while Olivia and Clara prepared breakfast. After eating together, Wade would go about his ranch work, mending fences, training horses, checking his trap lines, while the sisters cleaned the cabin and tended the garden. Initially, Olivia insisted they would contribute to their keep, offering Wade the small amount of money they'd saved. He refused it flatly. Keep your savings, he said. Your help around here is payment enough. Indeed, the sisters found numerous ways to improve the cabin. Clara, who had a talent for sewing, mended Wade's worn shirts and fashioned new curtains from fabric they found in his trunk. Olivia, discovering his collection of books gathering dust on a shelf, organized them and began reading aloud in the evenings, a practice Wade seemed to enjoy, though he said little. A week after their arrival, Wade announced he needed to visit a neighboring ranch to deliver a horse he'd trained. I'll be gone overnight, he told them over breakfast. The Morgans have been waiting on this gelding for their son. Will you be safe on the trail alone? Clara asked, concern evident in her voice. Wade smiled. I've been making this trip for years. Besides, Thunder knows the way blindfolded. After he departed, the sisters took advantage of his absence to thoroughly clean the cabin. While sweeping under his bed, Olivia discovered a small wooden box. She knew she shouldn't pry, but curiosity overcame her. Inside, she found letters tied with string, a tarnished silver pocket watch, and a daguerreotype of a young woman with a serious expression. Livy, Clara scolded when she caught her sister examining the items. That's private. Olivia quickly returned everything to the box. You're right. I shouldn't have looked. But the image of the woman stayed with her. Was she someone from Wade's past, a sweetheart, a wife? The thought that Wade might have a wife somewhere made Olivia's stomach twist uncomfortably. She told herself it was merely concern about their situation if he were married. Their staying here would be even more improper. But deep down, she recognized the feeling for what it was, jealousy. When had she begun to care for Wade Daniels? Was it when he pulled them from the river? When he defended them to Mrs. Sullivan? Or was it in the quiet moments since, watching him gently train a skittish colt, or noticing how he always made sure Clara had the warmest spot by the fire when the evening turned cool? Olivia pushed these thoughts aside. They were dependent on Wade's charity for now, but that would change. They needed to focus on finding new employment, not developing inappropriate attachments. Wade returned late the following day, looking tired but pleased. The Morgans were happy with the gelding, he reported. And they mentioned something that might interest you both. He removed his hat, hanging it on a peg by the door. Seems the schoolteacher in Cedar Creek is leaving to get married. They're looking for a replacement. Clara's eyes widened. A teaching position? Oh, Livy. That would be perfect for you. Olivia had taught briefly back east before their parents' illness. Cedar Creek, I don't know it. Small settlement about 15 miles northwest, Wade explained. Mostly ranching families. They've built a proper school, though the mine owner's wife insisted. Pays $25 a month plus a room at the boarding house. Olivia's heart quickened. It was a respectable position that would support them both. When would they need someone? End of the month. I told the Morgans I might know someone suitable. Wade hesitated. There's more. Their cook mentioned needing help with the household. It wouldn't be much pay, but with your teaching salary. We could manage together, Clara finished, excitement coloring her cheeks. Livy, this is the chance we've been hoping for. Olivia nodded, trying to match her sister's enthusiasm. It was indeed an excellent opportunity, exactly what they needed. So why did the prospect of leaving Wade's cabin fill her with such unexpected sadness? The Morgans invited us all for Sunday dinner, Wade continued. Said they'd like to meet you before recommending you to the school board. That's very kind, Olivia said. We'd be happy to go. Later, as she helped Wade groom Thunder, Olivia found herself studying his profile in the lantern light. It's generous of you to help us find positions. Wade ran a brush along Thunder's flank. I know what it's like to need a fresh start. Besides, you can't stay here indefinitely. No, of course not, Olivia agreed quickly, trying to ignore the pang his matter-of-fact tone caused. It wouldn't be proper. Wade was silent for a long moment. It's not about propriety, Olivia. You and Clara deserve better than hiding away on my ranch. You're educated women with skills. Cedar Creek is a decent place with good folks. You've done so much for us already, I don't know how to thank you. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the shadowy stable. No thanks needed. Just seeing you both recover from that river ordeal is enough. Olivia wanted to say more, to tell him how his quiet kindness had affected her, how she'd come to look forward to their shared meals and silent evenings by the fire. But the words caught in her throat. Instead, she handed him the curry comb and bid him good night. Sunday arrived clear and mild, perfect for the ride to the Morgan ranch. Wade had procured a second horse from a neighbor, so Olivia wouldn't have to ride double with Clara or himself. As they set out, Olivia felt a flutter of nerves. This meeting could determine their future. The Morgan ranch was considerably larger than Wade's modest homestead. A sprawling main house stood surrounded by several outbuildings, with corrals holding dozens of cattle and horses. As they approached, a gray-haired man emerged onto the porch, waving in greeting. Daniels, right on time, he called, descending the steps to meet them. And these must be the ladies you mentioned. Wade made the introductions. George Morgan, this is Miss Olivia Whittaker and her sister, Miss Clara. Ladies, Mr. Morgan owns one of the largest cattle operations in the territory. Morgan shook their hands warmly. Welcome, welcome. Margaret's been cooking since dawn. She's eager to meet you both. He led them toward the house, chatting amiably about his ranch and family. Inside, they were greeted by Mrs. Morgan, a handsome woman with kind eyes, and their son Elijah, a serious young man about Clara's age. The house was comfortably furnished with pieces that suggested Eastern refinement mixed with Western practicality. Miss Whittaker, Mrs. Morgan said as they settled in the parlor, Wade tells us you taught school back east. Yes, for 2 years in Pennsylvania, Olivia confirmed. I had 23 pupils ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Mrs. Morgan nodded approvingly. Our school has 18 children currently with similar ages. The previous teacher, Miss Holloway, established a good foundation, but she's marrying a minor from Silver City next month. The conversation flowed easily from there. Mr. Morgan discussed the community of Cedar Creek, its church, general store, and the silver mine that had brought prosperity to the area. Mrs. Morgan described the comfortable room available at the town's small boarding house, while Elijah shyly asked Clara about her interests. Throughout the discussion, Olivia was aware of Wade sitting quietly beside her, offering occasional comments but mostly observing. He seemed at ease with the Morgans, respected by them in a way that contrasted sharply with his reception in Hillsborough. After a hearty dinner, Mrs. Morgan suggested Elijah show Clara the garden, while Mr. Morgan invited Wade to examine a new thoroughbred he'd purchased. Left alone with Olivia, Mrs. Morgan grew more direct. Wade Daniels is a good man, she said, pouring tea into delicate cups. One of the best horse trainers in the territory, though few know it outside those who have worked with him. Olivia nodded. He's been very kind to us. Kind, yes, but he's also cautious. George told me about your situation, how Wade rescued you both from the river. She studied Olivia over her teacup. In the 4 years we've known him, you're the first people he's ever brought to our home. Olivia felt her cheeks warm. We're simply boarders, Mrs. Morgan, temporary guests until we can establish ourselves. The older woman's eyes twinkled. Of course, but I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one notices. She set down her cup. Wade deserves happiness, Miss Whittaker. He's had more than his share of troubles. He mentioned being falsely accused in Texas, Olivia said carefully. Mrs. Morgan nodded. That's part of it. Did he tell you about his wife? Olivia's heart seemed to stop. Wife. She died of fever the same week he was arrested. He couldn't even attend her burial. Mrs. Morgan's expression softened. That's her picture he keeps Emmeline. They were married just a year. Olivia's mind raced back to the daguerreotype she'd found. I didn't know, she whispered. He doesn't speak of it often. But a grief like that changes a man. Mrs. Morgan reached across to pat Olivia's hand. I only tell you this so you understand why he might hold himself apart, even when his heart wishes otherwise. Before Olivia could respond, the others returned. The conversation shifted to the teaching position, with Mr. Morgan promising to arrange an interview with the school board the following week. By the time they prepared to leave, it was nearly sunset. The ride back to Wade's cabin was quieter than their journey out. Clara chattered excitedly about Elijah Morgan and the prospects in Cedar Creek, but Olivia found herself watching Wade, seeing him through new eyes. The grief he carried explained so much his solitary life, his hesitation to form attachments. That night after Clara had gone to bed, Olivia found Wade sitting on the porch steps, staring at the star-filled sky. She hesitated, then settled beside him, careful to maintain a proper distance. The Morgans are good people, she said softly. Wade nodded. Salt of the earth. George gave me my first breeding pair of horses when no one else would sell to me because of the rumors. Olivia gathered her courage. Mrs. Morgan told me about Emmeline. Wade went very still. For a moment, Olivia feared she'd overstepped. Then he sighed, a sound so full of old pain that it made her heart ache. I should have told you myself. You don't owe us your life story, Wade. He turned to look at her, his face half in shadow. Maybe not, but sometimes I think about how different things might have been if we'd had more time. If I hadn't been locked away when she needed me most. His voice roughened. They said the fever took her quickly. I hope that's true. Olivia fought the urge to take his hand. I'm so sorry. It was a long time ago. He looked back at the stars. The teaching job, you'll take it. The abrupt change of subject caught her off guard. If they offer it, yes, it's a wonderful opportunity. Cedar Creek's a good town. You and Clara will be happy there. Olivia studied his profile. And will you visit? It's not so far from here. A small smile touched his lips. Maybe. If I'm welcome. You'll always be welcome where we are, Wade Daniels, Olivia said, surprised by the fervor in her own voice. You saved our lives, we won't forget that. Wade turned to her, his expression unguarded for once. Is that all it is, Olivia? Gratitude? The question hung between them, laden with meaning. Olivia's heart pounded as she considered her answer. It would be safer to say yes to maintain the boundary between them, to protect them both from complications neither had sought. But the river had taught her how quickly life could change, how precious each moment truly was. No, she said finally, it's not just gratitude. Wade's eyes held hers, searching. Whatever he found there made him reach slowly for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. They sat in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, their joined hands a bridge across the solitude they'd both endured for too long. The following week passed in a flurry of activity. Wade traveled to Cedar Creek to speak with the school board chairman, arranging an interview for Olivia. Clara, meanwhile, met with Mrs. Morgan's cook and was promptly offered a position helping in the ranch house, with Sundays and Wednesday afternoons free. It's all happening so quickly, Clara said as they packed for their interview journey. 2 weeks ago we were washing linens at a boarding house, and now we have real prospects, Olivia finished, respectable work that uses our skills. She folded her best dress carefully into their trunk. We're fortunate. Clara sat on the edge of the bed. I'll miss this place, though. It feels like home already. Olivia nodded, understanding exactly what her sister meant. In their short time here, Wade's cabin had become more of a home than any place since their parents' house. The thought of leaving brought a hollow feeling to her chest. Since their conversation on the porch, something had shifted between Olivia and Wade. Nothing improper, he was unfailingly respectful, maintaining appropriate distance when they were together. But their eyes met more often across the dinner table, and sometimes their hands brushed when passing objects, lingering a moment longer than necessary. They left for Cedar Creek early on Tuesday, Wade driving the borrowed wagon with their trunk secured in the back. The journey took most of the day, with Clara eagerly pointing out landmarks and Wade occasionally sharing stories about the area. Cedar Creek proved to be larger than Olivia had expected, a proper town with a church, general store, blacksmith, and several other businesses lining its main street. The schoolhouse stood on a small rise at the edge of town, a white clapboard building with a bell tower that gleamed in the afternoon sun. "It's lovely," Olivia breathed as Wade helped her down from the wagon. "Wait until you see inside," he replied with a small smile. The mine owner's wife insisted on real glass windows and proper desks for every student. The boarding house where they would stay belonged to a widow named Mrs. Abernathy, a brisk, efficient woman who showed them to a comfortable room with 2 beds and a small sitting area. "Dinner's at 6 sharp," she informed them. "No gentlemen callers after 8 and no liquor on the premises." Her stern expression softened as she looked at Wade. "Though for you, Mr. Daniels, I'll make an exception for a cup of coffee in the parlor." Olivia's interview the following morning went remarkably well. The school board, consisting of the mine owner, the minister, and 2 prominent ranchers, seemed impressed by her experience and references. By noon, she was offered the position to begin in 3 weeks when the current teacher departed. "This calls for a celebration," Wade declared when she shared the news. "There's a decent restaurant here, not fancy, but the food's good." Over a lunch of roast beef and potatoes, they discussed the arrangements. Clara would begin at the Morgan Ranch immediately, living in the staff quarters there. Olivia would return to Wade's cabin to prepare for her teaching role, then move to Cedar Creek when the position officially began. "I have some books that might help," Wade offered. "Teaching materials from back east. A friend sent them years ago, thinking I might." He trailed off, looking slightly embarrassed, "Thinking you might what?" Olivia prompted. Wade shrugged. "Start a school myself, I suppose. I taught reading to some of the ranch hands in Texas." At their surprised expressions, he added, "I wasn't always a horse trainer. My father was a professor before he lost everything in the war." This glimpse into Wade's past intrigued Olivia. How many layers remained to this complex man who'd entered their lives so suddenly? Their celebratory mood was interrupted when a broad-shouldered man with a florid face approached their table, swaying slightly with drink despite the early hour. "Well, if it ain't the horse thief," the man slurred, glaring at Wade. "Thought I told you to stay out of my territory." Wade's expression hardened. "Thompson, you're drunk. Go home." Thompson's bloodshot eyes shifted to Olivia and Clara. "Got yourself some fancy company, I see." "Ladies know what kind of man they're dining with." Wade stood slowly, his voice low but firm. "That's enough. These ladies aren't part of our disagreement." Thompson sneered. "Disagreement? You cheated me, plain and simple. That stallion was worth twice what you paid. We had a contract. You signed it." Wade's posture was tense, but he kept his voice level. "The price was fair." "Fair? Nothing's fair about a convict taking advantage." Wade cut him off, stepping close enough that Thompson instinctively backed up a pace. "I said that's enough. Walk away, Thompson." For a tense moment, it seemed the larger man might throw a punch. Then the restaurant owner appeared, a shotgun casually displayed in his hands. "Problem, gentlemen?" Thompson spat on the floor. "No problem, just having a friendly chat with a thief and his whores." Wade moved so quickly Olivia barely saw it. One moment Thompson was sneering, the next he was pinned against the wall, Wade's forearm against his throat. "Apologize to the ladies," Wade said, his voice deadly quiet. "Now." Thompson's face purpled, but something in Wade's eyes must have convinced him. "Sorry," he choked out. Wade released him, and Thompson staggered back, adjusting his collar. "This ain't over, Daniels," he muttered, then lurched out of the restaurant. Wade returned to the table, his expression grim. "I apologize for that. Thompson's had a grudge since I outbid him on a horse last year. He gets mean when he drinks." Olivia reached across the table to touch his hand. "You have nothing to apologize for." The incident cast a shadow over their remaining time in Cedar Creek. Wade insisted on escorting them everywhere, his eyes constantly scanning for Thompson. When it came time to leave Clara at the Morgan Ranch, the farewell was emotional. "You'll be careful?" Clara asked, hugging Olivia tightly. "And you'll write?" "Every week," Olivia promised. "And I'll see you when I return for the teaching position." The journey back to Wade's cabin was quieter than their outbound trip. Olivia sensed Wade was troubled by the confrontation with Thompson, though he tried to hide it. "He's not worth your concern," she said finally, breaking the silence. "Men like that make themselves important by diminishing others." Wade glanced at her, a hint of surprise in his expression. "You're right, but his kind can be dangerous when crossed." "Is that why you live so far from town? Because of men like Thompson?" Wade was quiet for so long that Olivia thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed. "Partly. After Texas, I learned it's easier to avoid trouble than to fight it, but mostly." He adjusted the reins in his hands. "Mostly, I needed the quiet to remember who I was before everything happened." Olivia understood then that his solitude wasn't merely about avoiding gossip or confrontation, it was a form of healing. "And have you remembered who you were?" A small smile touched his lips. "Getting there. Having you and Clara at the cabin, it's been good. Reminded me what it's like to care about someone else's day, someone else's happiness." The simple admission warmed Olivia more than any elaborate declaration could have. "It's been good for us too, more than good." Back at the cabin, the absence of Clara was immediately noticeable. The space felt larger, quieter. Olivia busied herself preparing dinner, trying to maintain their usual routine despite the change. As they ate that evening, Wade seemed preoccupied. Finally, he set down his fork. "Olivia, there's something I need to ask you." Her heart quickened. "Yes." "These next few weeks, before you start teaching, it's not proper for you to stay here alone with me." Olivia felt a flush rise to her cheeks. She'd been so focused on the excitement of the new position that she hadn't fully considered the impropriety of their situation. "You're right, of course." "I've been thinking," Wade continued, "about what Thompson said, about how it looked, you staying here. I don't want your reputation damaged before you even begin your new role." "What are you suggesting?" Wade met her eyes directly. "There's a minister in Hillsborough, we could." "That is, if you were willing." He took a deep breath. "We could marry." Olivia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Marry?" Wade stood abruptly, moving to the fireplace. "It's a practical solution. You need somewhere to stay until the teaching position begins. I need," he faltered. "That is, the cabin could use a woman's touch permanently." Olivia felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. "Wade Daniels, are you proposing marriage as a practical solution?" He turned to face her, his expression pained. "I'm making a mess of this, aren't I?" "What I'm trying to say is that I care for you, Olivia, more than I expected to care for anyone again, but I have nothing to offer except this cabin and my good name which, as you've seen, isn't worth much in some quarters." Olivia rose from the table, moving to stand before him. "Your name is worth everything to me. You are the most honorable man I've ever known." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Then you'll consider it. Marriage, I'll consider it," Olivia said carefully, "but not as a practical arrangement, not as a solution to a problem of propriety." Wade stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "What would you consider it as then?" Olivia gathered her courage. "As a beginning, as a choice made from love, not convenience. As two people who want to build a life together because they can't imagine being apart." Wade's hand came up to gently cup her cheek. "Is that what you want, Olivia, a life with me?" "Yes," she whispered, "if that's what you truly want as well." His answer came not in words but in the gentle press of his lips against hers, a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. When they parted, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he murmured. "After Emmeline, I closed that part of myself off. But from the moment I pulled you from that river, something changed." "For me too," Olivia admitted, "though I tried to tell myself it was just gratitude." Wade smiled, the first full, unguarded smile she'd seen from him. "So, Miss Whittaker, will you marry me?" "Not for propriety's sake, but because I love you and want to spend my life with you." "Yes, Mr. Daniels," Olivia replied, her heart overflowing. "I will marry you for exactly those reasons." The next morning, they rode to Cedar Creek to share their news with Clara. Her initial surprise quickly gave way to delight. "I knew it," she exclaimed, hugging her sister fiercely. "The way you two looked at each other even when you thought no one was watching, the Morgans were equally supportive. Mrs. Morgan insisted on hosting the wedding at their ranch, overriding Wade's protests that a simple ceremony would suffice. "Nonsense," she declared. "A wedding is a celebration. You both deserve that." 2 weeks later, on a perfect autumn day, Olivia stood in a bedroom at the Morgan Ranch, wearing a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Morgan had altered from one of her own. Clara carefully arranged wildflowers in Olivia's hair. "You look beautiful," Clara said, stepping back to admire her work. "Wade won't be able to take his eyes off you." A knock at the door preceded Mrs. Morgan's entrance. "The minister's ready, dear, and your groom is waiting, looking very handsome in his new suit, I might add." Olivia took a deep breath, willing her nervousness to subside. This was right, she knew it with a certainty that surprised her. In the short time since the river had swept her into Wade's life, she had found not just safety, but a love she hadn't known she was seeking. The ceremony took place in the Morgans' garden, with only a small gathering in attendance: Clara, the Morgans, and their son, a few neighboring ranchers, and, to Olivia's surprise, Marshall Evans from Hillsborough. Wade stood waiting by an arch of autumn flowers, looking indeed very handsome in his new suit. His expression as Olivia walked toward him was one of such wonder and love that it banished any lingering doubts. The minister's words were traditional, but Olivia barely heard them, focused instead on Wade's strong hands holding hers, on his steady voice as he promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Wade's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, a beginning rather than an ending. The small reception that followed was joyful, with Mrs. Morgan's excellent food and Mr. Morgan's best whiskey. Even Marshall Evans seemed to enjoy himself, pulling Wade aside at one point for what appeared to be a serious conversation. Later, as they prepared to leave, Evans approached Olivia. "Mrs. Daniels," he said, the new name sending a thrill through her, "I want you to know something. Your husband is one of the finest men I've ever known. What happened in Texas was a travesty, but he never let it turn him bitter." Olivia smiled. "I know what kind of man I married, Marshall, but thank you for saying so." Evans nodded, "Just wanted to be sure." "Oh, and you might be interested to know that Thompson won't be troubling you. He's been escorted to the territorial border with a strong suggestion not to return." As they rode back to the cabin, their cabin now, Olivia couldn't help but marvel at how drastically her life had changed in just a few weeks. From nearly drowning in a river to starting a new life with a man who had quickly become essential to her happiness. "What are you thinking?" Wade asked, his arm secure around her waist as they rode thunder together. "That sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best ones," Olivia replied. "If the river hadn't swept us away that day, I believe we would have found each other somehow," Wade said confidently. "Some things are meant to be." Olivia leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I never took you for a romantic, Mr. Daniels." His chuckle rumbled against her back. "I'm full of surprises, Mrs. Daniels." The cabin looked different as they approached, more like a home than ever before. Wade had spent the past days preparing for their return, adding curtains Clara had sewn and building a proper wardrobe for Olivia's clothes. As they reached the porch, Wade surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. "Tradition," he explained as he carried her across the threshold. Inside, he had arranged wildflowers in a vase on the table and built a welcoming fire in the hearth. That night, as husband and wife, they discovered a new dimension to their growing love, a physical connection as tender and passionate as their emotional one. In Wade's arms, Olivia found a belonging she'd never known before, and in her embrace, Wade found healing for wounds he'd thought would never close. The weeks that followed were filled with adjustments and discoveries as they learned to share a life. Wade continued his horse training, while Olivia prepared for her teaching position, reviewing the books he'd mentioned, which proved to be an impressive collection of educational texts. "My father's," Wade explained when she remarked on them. He believed education was the most valuable gift one could give. He hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking, the cabin is small for a family. I have land enough to build something larger if you'd like." Olivia looked up from the reader she'd been studying. "A family?" Wade smiled sheepishly. "I hope so, someday, if you want children." "I do," Olivia said softly. "Very much." The day Olivia began teaching at Cedar Creek School arrived with mixed emotions. She was excited to use her skills again, to shape young minds and be part of a community. But leaving Wade each morning proved harder than she'd expected. They'd compromised on her living arrangements. She would stay at Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house during the school week, then return to the cabin on weekends. It wasn't ideal, but it preserved appearances in the small town where a teacher was expected to be above reproach. Her first day was both exhilarating and exhausting. The 18 students ranged from shy to boisterous, their abilities as varied as their personalities. By the end of the day, Olivia had a clear sense of the challenges ahead and the rewards. That Friday, when Wade came to collect her, the reunion was sweet despite their brief separation. As they rode home together, Olivia filled him in on her students and the progress they'd already made. "There's a boy, Thomas, who reminds me of you," she said. "Quiet but observant with a quick mind, he struggles with reading but has a remarkable memory for facts." Wade listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest. When they reached the cabin, he surprised her with a small wooden case he'd crafted to hold her teaching supplies. "So they don't get damaged in the journey back and forth," he explained. It was these thoughtful gestures that continued to deepen Olivia's love for him the way he anticipated her needs. His quiet support of her independence even as they built their life together. As autumn deepened into winter, their rhythm stabilized. Weekdays were devoted to their separate work, while weekends were a precious time of togetherness. They rode to visit Clara at the Morgan Ranch, attended church in Cedar Creek, and spent long evenings by the fire, talking or reading aloud. One snowy December evening, as they sat wrapped in a quilt before the hearth, Olivia rested her head on Wade's shoulder. "I have something to tell you." Wade turned to look at her, firelight dancing in his eyes. "What is it?" "I went to see the doctor in Cedar Creek today. He confirmed what I've suspected for a few weeks now." She took his hand, placing it gently on her stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Wade's expression transformed from surprise to wonder to joy in rapid succession. "A baby, you're certain?" Olivia nodded, her own eyes filling with happy tears. "In early summer, the doctor thinks. June, perhaps." Wade gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of precious glass. "Olivia," he whispered against her hair, "you've given me back everything I thought was lost forever. A home, a future, and now a family." The news of their coming child accelerated Wade's plans to build a larger house. Throughout the winter, whenever weather permitted, he worked on clearing land closer to Cedar Creek, reducing Olivia's commute to the school. Clara was ecstatic about becoming an aunt, visiting whenever she could to help prepare for the baby. She had flourished at the Morgan Ranch, growing more confident and independent. Olivia noticed with amusement the way young Elijah Morgan found excuses to be wherever Clara was working, and how her sister's cheeks colored whenever he spoke to her. As Olivia's pregnancy progressed, the school board arranged for an assistant to help with her classes, allowing her to continue teaching while accommodating her changing condition. The community had embraced her fully, any initial wariness about her connection to Wade long forgotten. Wade himself became something of a local hero that winter when he led a search party to find 2 children lost in a blizzard, tracking them through the snow and bringing them home safely. The incident seemed to erase the last of the old rumors, cementing his place in Cedar Creek society. By April, the framework of their new house stood proudly on the hillside overlooking Cedar Creek. Wade had designed it with care: a large kitchen, a dedicated room for Olivia's books and teaching materials, space for Clara to visit, and most precious of all, a nursery with windows facing the morning sun. As they stood surveying the progress one golden evening, Wade's arm around Olivia's expanding waistline, she felt a contentment so complete it almost frightened her. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is our life," she admitted. "After everything that happened the river, Mrs. Sullivan, all of it to end up here like this." Wade kissed her temple. "Not an ending, love, a beginning." Their son was born on a perfect June morning, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his healthy lungs to the world. They named him Henry, after Olivia's father, with George as his middle name in honor of Mr. Morgan, who had become like family to them. Wade, who had paced anxiously throughout Olivia's labor, was transformed the moment the midwife placed Henry in his arms. The tender way he held their son, the awe in his expression as tiny fingers curled around his own, these were images Olivia knew she would treasure forever. By summer's end, their new house was complete, and they moved in with a small celebration attended by friends from both Cedar Creek and surrounding ranches. Clara, who had indeed begun a careful courtship with Elijah Morgan, helped arrange the furniture and hang curtains in each room. "It's perfect," she declared, standing in the center of the spacious main room. "Exactly what you both deserve." Life settled into a new rhythm with Henry at its center. Olivia took a temporary leave from teaching to care for him, though she continued to tutor several students who came to the house in the afternoons. Wade's horse breeding business flourished, his reputation for fair dealing and exceptional training spreading throughout the territory. On Henry's first birthday, as friends gathered to celebrate, Olivia found herself standing on the porch, watching Wade show their sturdy little boy to one of the gentle mares. Henry's delighted laughter carried across the yard, a sound of pure joy that still amazed her. Clara joined her, linking their arms. "Happy?" she asked softly. Olivia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. How could she explain that happy seemed too small a word for what she felt? How could she describe the richness of a life built with love, the security of knowing that no matter what challenges came, Wade would be beside her to face them? "Remember that day on the river?" Clara asked. "I was so afraid, I thought we were going to die." "I remember," Olivia said. "I couldn't reach you, the current was too strong." Clara squeezed her arm. "But then he came, like something out of a storybook, riding into that raging water without a thought for himself." She smiled as she watched Wade lift Henry onto the mare's back, holding him securely as the boy patted the horse's neck. "I think I knew even then, when I was barely conscious, that he was someone special." Olivia followed her gaze. "He would say we saved him as much as he saved us. That he was drowning in his own way before we came along. Maybe that's what love is," Clara mused. "Saving each other over and over again in all the ways that matter." As twilight fell and their guests departed, Olivia stood with Wade on the porch of the home they'd built together, their sleeping son cradled in his father's strong arms. The river that had nearly claimed their lives was visible in the distance, a silver ribbon winding through the landscape. "I was thinking," Wade said, his voice soft in the gathering dusk, "about names for the ranch. It should have a proper name now that it's becoming known." Olivia leaned against him, content. "What did you have in mind?" "River's Edge," he suggested, "to remember where our story began." She smiled up at him, this man who had pulled her from the water and into a life more wonderful than she could have imagined. "River's Edge it is, a perfect name for a new beginning." Wade bent to kiss her, gentle and sure, their son nestled safely between them. Around them, the land stretched wide and promising, and ahead lay all the days of their lives, days they would fill together with love and work and family, the current of their shared destiny carrying them forward into a future bright with hope. 5 years later, River's Edge Ranch had become one of the most respected horse breeding operations in the New Mexico territory. The house on the hill had expanded to accommodate their growing family. Henry, now a sturdy 6-year-old with his father's thoughtful eyes, had been joined by 3-year-old twins Sarah and Emmeline, named for both grandmothers. Olivia had returned to teaching part-time, now at a larger schoolhouse built to serve the expanding community of Cedar Creek. Wade's methods for training horses had become so renowned that ranchers from as far as California sent young stock to learn under his hand. Clara and Elijah Morgan had married 2 years earlier and lived at the Morgan Ranch, expecting their first child in the autumn. The sisters remained as close as ever, their weekly family dinners a cherished tradition. On the anniversary of the day Wade had pulled them from the river, the family always took a quiet moment to remember how close they had come to a different fate. This year, as they stood together on the hill overlooking their land, Wade wrapped his arms around Olivia from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Grateful?" he asked, a tradition of their remembrance. "Always," she replied, leaning back against the solid strength that had become her constant. Around them, their children played in the long grass, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. Later, as twilight settled over the land and the children slept, Olivia and Wade sat on the porch swing he had built when she was expecting the twins. His arm rested comfortably around her shoulders, her head against his chest, positions as natural to them now as breathing. "I received a letter today," Wade said, "from the governor's office." Olivia looked up, curious. "What did it say?" "They're forming a commission to establish standards for land and water rights in the territory. Asked if I'd serve as a representative for this county." His voice held a note of wonder. "Said my reputation for fairness was well known." Olivia squeezed his hand, pride warming her. "They couldn't ask for a better man." Wade shook his head slowly. "When I think of where I was when you came into my life, a solitary man hiding from the world, afraid to trust or hope, and now this." "You were always this man," Olivia said firmly. "You just needed reminding." He kissed her then, with the same tenderness that still made her heart quicken after all these years. When they parted, he smiled that full, unguarded smile that had once been so rare and was now a daily gift. "Have I told you today that I love you, Olivia Daniels?" She returned his smile, thinking of the river that had nearly claimed them and the current of life that had carried them to this perfect moment instead. "Yes," she answered, "but I never tire of hearing it." As night descended fully over River's Edge Ranch, stars appeared one by one in the vast New Mexico sky. Inside the house built with love, a family slept safely, their lives intertwined by chance and choice, and the courage to reach for happiness even when it seemed impossible. And outside, the distant sound of the river continued its eternal song, a reminder of danger survived, and destinies altered in the sweep of its powerful current. A reminder that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the greatest joys, if only we have the strength to hold on until loving hands pull us to safety.